Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone is a ghost tale with a gothic vibe. It thrives as a horror film, but if we peel back the layers, it's a scathing yet respectful look at the Spanish Civil War. The veil of fantasy merely allows del Toro to stress the importance of memory, remembrance, and reflection. The film is set in 1939, the final year of the Spanish Civil War, and often viewed as the catalyst for World War II. In fact, months after this war ended, Hitler invaded Poland. For a bit of context, the Spanish Civil War was the culmination of right-wing nationalists trying to usurp the current left-wing Republican government. Helmed by dictator Franco, the right-wing brutally murdered those who disagreed with them in their conquest of Spain. Historically, this is seen as the first war that saw a nation drop bombs on its own civilians. Del Toro focuses on this precise period of Spanish history to deliver a beautiful tale about the acceptance of trauma, aided by obvious undertones of the Civil War. The Devil's Backbone begins and ends in identical manner. The same voiceover repeats, the same shot of the bloodied Santi appears. What this does is trap the audience in the same cycle that the Spanish civilians were living in. No resolution, no bright future ahead, and quite simply, the fear of there always being a war. The monologue,
¿Qué es un fantasma? Un evento terrible condenado a repetirse una y otra vez. Un instante de dolor quizá. Algo muerto que parece por momentos vivo aún. Un sentimiento suspendido en el tiempo. Como una fotografía borrosa.
simply refers to the war through the totem of ghost. If we replace ghost with war, the quote only strengthens, since a blurred photograph lends itself to the black and white images of the past, and a tragedy condemned to repeat itself time and time again is an acknowledgement of the cycle of war and its never-ending nature. That cycle is what the audience becomes trapped by when the symmetrical scenes open and close the film. We need look no further than the bomb to truly understand the effect of the Spanish Civil War on the civilians of the country. The bomb sits at the heart of the orphanage, casting a shadow over the children and everyone in close proximity. It's a metaphor for these civilians living in the shadow of the Spanish Civil War, waiting for something to tick for their end to come. At any moment, the unexploded bomb could detonate and kill everybody in the orphanage. Still, people go about their day-to-day lives ignoring it. It's rarely given any thought, and that's what Del Toro criticizes. Spanish history has almost forgotten about the Civil War. It's rarely taught to children and hardly enters discussion. As a Spanish child growing up, I never had a conversation with my parents about the war, nor my grandparents. It was just something that loomed in the background. And that's why this film is crucial. Del Toro placing the bomb in the middle of the orphanage is a way of shoving fear into the faces of those attempting to ignore it and go about their day-to-day life. Yet, without isolating audiences and begging them to empathise with Spain, Del Toro makes this a universal tale. One that, if you pick any war, the story still applies to it. By making the emotions and criticisms universal, the film immediately becomes a guidebook on what the repression of emotions and trauma can do to a community and nation. What the entirety of the film represents is not Del Toro saying that the left were perfect and the right horrible, but rather showing what both sides did. In doing so, he does not glorify the left wing, there is neutrality. Notice how there's no resolution to the kid's story. This is because the Spanish left wing never won, and despite their attempts to protect civilians, they could not prevent the traumatic stains that this would leave on individuals and the nation as a whole. This is reinforced by the final shot of the film. The children walk away from the camera, a cliche of war films. They hobble, look injured, and have no bright future ahead of them. This is ultimately a product of Franco's Spain. Since it was the youth that were targeted to be soldiers and martyrs, Del Toro's ending gives this film a powerful punch, and it's reminiscent of wars all over the planet where children become a product of the wars created by adults. Since the youth were sent to war, that's what these children represent: tainted innocence, forced to grow up and face the horrors of a world they did not create but simply had to partake in. Jacinto, the film's titular villain, is depicted as a proto-fascist and simply a vessel for dictator Franco, since he oppresses the children, seeks infinite wealth, and believes himself to be better than the left wing. Ultimately, he's the one who brings the bomb down to the orphanage and kills Santi, the film's recurring ghost. What happens in the orphanage is a microcosm of the actual civil war. Our protagonist, Carlos, seeks the truth and fights his oppressors like the Republicans. Meanwhile, Jacinto embodies the typical right-wing nationalist. Jacinto has this one moment in the film that sums up his character and the ideologies of the Spanish society at the time. He is attempting to fix a radio that no longer works. We assume it's to hear the current events of the ongoing war. Instead, upon whacking it, Jacinto changes it to a music station. This encapsulates society wanting to ignore the war, instead drowning it out and waiting for it to go away. When Jacinto hits the radio, it could be seen as a metaphor for the continuation of war. Humanity will live forever in a cycle of violence unless we learn to accept trauma instead of suppressing it. When Jacinto orders the children to take the statue of Christ out to the patio, it was a clear metaphor of the war. Putting Christ outdoors was a representation of the left's vulnerability to Franco's men, yet on a grander scale, Spain's vulnerability to Europe. The military coup should have been dealt with by the international community, but wasn't because everybody was afraid of upsetting the balance in Europe since ties with the fascistic side were very strong. Again, Spain refused to deal with its internal trauma and descended into anarchic brutality and murder. Del Toro depicts this by using the orphanage as an extension of the country. Ghosts are essentially a metaphor for the traumatic events of the war, memories of the war if you will. In fact, there is one particular moment when Santi's ghost says, it's an allusion to the idea in the back of everyone's mind during war. They don't want to accept it, but there is always that lingering feeling. While it works in the spiritual and ghostly context of the film, it's yet another link to the Spanish Civil War. Conflict, and war by extension, produce monsters like Jacinto, like dictator Franco. This is Del Toro's way of humanizing ghosts and spirits while showing evil to be within humanity. As much as individuals and the nation tried to brush it to the side, the event still lingered in the background, much like Santi's ghost does throughout the film. Del Toro merely wants people to confront tragedy and embrace it so as to learn and change for the future. And that's the true beauty of The Devil's Backbone. You don't require an in-depth understanding of Spain or its history to truly appreciate the film. It's universal, extending itself to each and every single war that has ever been fought. While one can argue for The Devil's Backbone as a quintessential horror film, which it most certainly is, it cannot be simply lodged into one genre. This is one of the most powerful pieces of filmmaking put to screen with metaphors and ideas that extend themselves to the audience in an attempt to connect them to the characters through unequivocal understanding. We must learn from the lessons that this film teaches, the tale of Carlos and his orphan friends. This is, without a doubt, Del Toro's most explorative film to date and recommended viewing for absolutely everyone on this planet.